It is Friday, August 16th, 2019. Welcome to Raging Chicken's APSCUF podcast. This is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. Each week, I'm usually talking to our Capitol muckraker-in-chief, Sean Kitchen, about the good, the bad, and the ugly in state and national politics. However, Sean is MIA today. We were going to go today. As you recall in the last podcast, we said we're going to be off last week because I was going to be away and Sean had some stuff to do. So we talked about returning on this Friday. But, I got to say, Sean, are you ready to go tomorrow? Last night. And Sean said, I forgot or I thought we weren't going to do this, but whatever. But he said, no, yeah, we're going to go ahead and do this. But then this morning I get a text and Sean says, I forgot. I got something to do. I'm like, okay. All right. No problem, man. Okay, have a good one. Sean's been super, super busy. So I figured, he got a bunch of stuff. Although I did get a email just to actually right before. It's like 11 o'clock now. And it turns out Sean has been spotted. Apparently, just the thing he had to do apparently was he had to do his laundry. And then he had to go get coffee. And the last thing I heard was that he was headed out to kind of sit on some porch somewhere. So, I understand. Plans are plans, right? I mean, everyone's got to do the laundry, all right? Everyone's got to get coffee. But whatever. So, Sean might be back next week, might not be. We don't know. Which will get to me to some of my programming stuff we're going to talk about a little bit. Sean's got a really busy week next week. Meeting with Democratic Party operatives. As you recall, Sean has been recently elected to a young Democrat position. I'm not saying anything, but I don't know. Maybe Raging Chicken doesn't fit in with this new kind of like insider lifestyle. I don't know. We'll see. Come on, Sean, you deserve it. Anyways, this week, I'm not going to have an incredibly long show. I want to just kind of talk about a couple of kind of key items, and then I'll talk a little bit about the kind of maybe some ideas about moving forward here. Obviously, we get, quite a few people listen to our podcast. The writing and on our main site has not been as consistent, and a lot of that is my fault. We have some great writers that kind of came on, and I just had a bunch of kids stuff for a while, so we've been a little light on the writing, but I'll get that in a minute. Well, meanwhile, national news, Trump really wants to buy Greenland, which is good, I guess. With all those melting glaciers, there's lots and lots of land for new golf courses. Greenland's foreign minister has basically come out and said, no, sorry, Greenland's not for sale. Socialist Greenland is not for sale. Sorry. The Rachel Maddow show last night, Rachel Maddow was convinced that somebody was actually playing a joke on him, and Trump is too gullible to realize that it was just a joke, and so now he keeps on asking about it. Who knows what the truth is there. But, whatever floats social media's boat, that's one of the things it did. But in more important news, Greta Thunberg, the 16-year-old Swedish climate activist, is sailing across the Atlantic to attend the UN Climate Action Summit. That's in September 23rd, I believe. And there's also be a bunch of climate action protests in New York. I'm going to do my best to get there because increasingly climate is, in my mind, the key issue. There's been new reports come out from Canada. New reports have come out about U.S. states that are warming the fastest. It turns out New Jersey is one of the fastest warming states in the country. There's a lot on that. And there are some miners in West Virginia. I don't know if people saw this, but they're basically saying, look, coal is over. And they're beginning to make that turn towards embracing the Green New Deal. If this happens, if we get organized miners that are basically turning towards a Green New Deal, then this is a game changer, folks. Because no longer will there be just a single kind of argument coming out of coal country, even from labor, right? But we need these jobs. No, they're saying no. Yeah, we want jobs, but we want jobs that, number one, are not going to give us black lung. Number two, that actually give us us and our children and our children's children a future in the state of West Virginia. Not to mention Kentucky. Not to mention Tennessee. Not to mention all of Appalachia coal country. Not to mention, hey, Pennsylvania. Get on board, Governor Wolf. Another kind of personal news that I've been paying attention to, APSCUF's interest-based bargaining continues as faculty are preparing to head back to campus without a contract. Now, okay, we get all the press releases. The press releases say that, everything's going great, right? It's super to have this nice relationship between management and the union, once again, collaborating on our future. Although, the lowly members like me, right, have no idea what the agreements are. So yesterday, I know that chapter presidents who serve as the negotiations committee, they're theoretically supposed to set the priorities for bargaining. It's going to be unclear, at least for me, about how that fits in with this kind of interest-based bargaining situation. Does the negotiations committee then serve as kind of does the negotiating team who's meeting with management and getting along so great, are they turning around and then informing the negotiations committee basically about what they've decided, and so the negotiations committee can nod? Or does the negotiation committee have a more active role? We don't know. So we have not seen any, any information about what is actually being negotiated, what terms are being out there, how does it come out. So, I guess this is one of those things, right? So we can either cross our fingers and hope for the best, because that has worked so well in the past, or, I don't know, something else. We'll see. Anyways, that's my little hobby horse, because, classes begin at August 26th at Kutztown and across the state in the Apache state system. I never like going back to campus without a contract, but, here we go again. So, well, bargaining is slated to continue on August 19th and 20th at the APSCUF office, right, and September 14th and 16th at the Dixon Center in Harrisburg. I'm sure there'll be good food and drinks. Anyway, speaking of drinks, free will releases are coming up for tomorrow. Tomorrow is another mash release. You remember we had the strawberry mash, we had the blueberry mash, the mango mash, and tomorrow the pineapple mash. That is a sour ale brewed with 850 pounds of pineapple puree, vanilla, and milk sugar. I'm totally psyched for this one. If you recall, of all the mashes, the mango was not my favorite. That does not mean it was not good. Actually, I finished the last one last night. Does not mean that it was not good. It was excellent, but it was a little too sweet for my taste. The strawberry mash was phenomenal. The blueberry mash was phenomenal. I'm looking forward to the pineapple mash. Anyways, that'll be available tomorrow on Saturday at both the Peddler's Village and the Percy locations. There'll also be 4-packs, right? So Percy's got a farmer's market, kind of Percy's where I live, farmer's market, and that farmer's market will also have 4-packs, and Wrightstown Farmer's Market will also have it on Saturday. Last week, there was a double can release. Now, I wasn't here, obviously. It was a double can release, but just to let you know, Scarecrow, for those of you who are in this field, if Sean was here, he'd probably be gagging right now because he can't stand this kind of stuff. But it's an autumn spice wheat ale with vanilla, allspice, nutmeg, and cinnamon. That came out last week. It's not. They claim it's not your typical pumpkin beer. I happen to kind of like Scarecrow. It's good. I think if I remember right, they had an Imperial Scarecrow one year, which I kind of like better than the regular one, but we'll see. They also released Extra Special Peach, and that's their quote-unquote nod to a traditional English style, with a modern twist. Late edition peach rooibos, I don't know how to say it, rooibos tea, steeped during fermentation. Notes of peach cobbler, hibiscus, and nectarine. That's it. Comes in at 4.8 ABV. So there's there. I want to remind everybody, tune in to the Rick Smith Show on Free Speech TV this and every Saturday at 7 p.m. Eastern. You can stream the show live at freespeech.org. You can also tune in to the Dish Network, DirecTV, through the Free Speech TV app on Roku. Make sure you also listen to Rick's daily podcast, and you get that wherever you get your podcasts, iTunes, Podbean, or wherever that might be. And if we want a progressive future, we need progressive media. And you can help support Pull No Punches, homegrown progressive media today. Become a member of Raging Chicken Press for as little as $5 a month. Simply go to patreon.com/rcpress and choose your membership level. If you're not ready to become a member, no problem. Just go to ragingchickenpress.org, click the big blue donate button, right sidebar, and give what you can. But the best way to keep the media in the movement and the movement in the media is to become a member for as little as $5 a month by going to patreon.com/rcpress today. Yes, I'm kind of a little bit rambly today, everybody, and back. It's been kind of a remarkably hectic week for me. Just on a personal basis. I mean, last week I was away visiting my folks, kind of up in central New York. Spent a little time in the Adirondacks. And the way the whole thing worked out, it ended up being a lot more hectic than a vacation should be. So came back kind of not exactly rested. Had some really good times. I got together with an old friend of mine, across the street neighbor, my best friend growing up, and his kids and my kids. They got together. That was like the capper. It was fantastic to hang out with them and have the two families together, kind of doing the whole reminiscent thing. That was a blast, and so we're going to try to make that a yearly thing. So that was probably the highlight of my trip. It was also my daughter's birthday. She just turned 8, and so we had 2 birthday parties up there, and came back and had a birthday party here on Monday night, and then we've kind of gone from there. But it's been one thing after another this week. And usually my kids would be in summer camp for the summer, but I think I might have talked about this before on the show that this year they had a bad experience last year, which is they just bored out of their minds because of random stuff that happened at the place they usually went. So we did some, I had a couple camps, but I kind of, did the daddy daycare stuff or daddy camp stuff. And it's been awesome spending time with my kids this summer. But now I'm kind of coming back. I've got to finish up all my syllabi and things like this for the semester coming up. And I was trying to squeeze in work and other stuff, and it was just kind of hectic. So whatever, it is what it is. And about a little over a week from heading back to campus for the fall semester at Kutztown University. Anyways, you probably saw this stuff. Just got to do the quick touch on the news, and then I'll kind of talk about some programming stuff. I don't want to keep you guys too long today, especially since Sean's not here. Sean, it's too bad, too, because Sean had some kind of really cool stuff going on. I don't know how much of it he's going to share on the podcast and things like this, but it was really he had a busy week for real. All kidding aside. So. And which is why he had to do his laundry this morning and needed the coffee to keep himself going and needed to head to the porch to kind of spend the afternoon. So, I mean, it's a well-deserved break, Sean. So climate stuff is big in my mind. There's been a couple reports that have been released this week, or last couple weeks, actually. One, as I mentioned, from Canada is talking about the climate impacts are worse than expected. This is what scientists have been talking about for a long time now, is that, look, the climate change is not going to be this kind of incremental graph, right? It's not going to be this gradual increase and it'll just kind of at a steady pace that we can predict. The thing is that there's all sorts of feedback loops that can actually suddenly kind of dramatically and quickly cause major disruptions. So this summer, for example, a couple of weeks ago, actually, the reports were coming out about with Greenland. Yes, no, not the one that Trump wants to buy it, right? That's so freaking nuts. But there was unprecedented melting in Greenland this summer. And they had temperatures, I believe, for a few days close to 90 degrees. They lost more ice in this summer than they have in since they've been doing measurements. And they said that there's been enough melting just in the summer to actually have a practical impact, like a direct impact on the actual sea levels, right? So to actually there's been enough melting to actually raise global sea levels. Now, it's just by, a couple of millimeters, right? But if you think about how vast the ocean is, it just gives you a sense of how much water was coming off the glaciers. And that, let's remember, that's not going back. Yes, there'll be some kind of replenishment when you kind of actually get the snows and stuff, if it snows. We've also seen unprecedented melting in the Arctic. So there's that part of stuff. So then we've got the this report that had come out that we're seeing unprecedented, or we're seeing kind of like, real, I don't know, substantial, significant impacts above global warming in the States too as well. So there was a report that was released, is basically looking at the actual temperatures increases that have taken place, and it turns out that New Jersey, right next to us here in Pennsylvania, New Jersey is seeing one of the largest. It has the, at least if not the largest, right? They're in contention to be the largest kind of increase in temperature of any place in the nation. That's amounted to basically an average temperature increase of about 4 and change degrees. I think it's like close to 2 degrees Celsius. So that means we're seeing the big parts of New Jersey have already seen 2 degrees warming. Right. Now, again, 2 degrees warming in New Jersey is one thing. 2 degrees warming of the planet is catastrophic. So, but what we're already beginning to see is like there was this story in a local paper about there's these lakes in New Jersey that used to be where they held skating competitions, used to be places where, before refrigeration, where they used to carve ice, right? And this is where they could, if you come take the ice blocks out of this lake, this pond, right, and this would be kind of shipped, and that's how we could keep things cold. Well, those games no longer take place because, and those ice obviously doesn't get cut because it doesn't freeze anymore, right? Or at least didn't freeze this year. Or partially freeze a little bit, but you couldn't walk across it anymore. They used to have, cars, and people used to go perform on the ice. And that has to do, right? You think about, 3 degrees, if you think about it in complete abstract, right? And it doesn't seem like a ton, although that starts to get you there. But if the difference is between the average temperature, right, of, during the winter of, 30 degrees and 33 degrees, right? You've just gone from frozen to liquid, right? Ice to water, right? 32 degrees, the freezing point, right? 30 degrees Fahrenheit. If you can't mess with physics. So you get past that thing, you get past that temperature, and you no longer get ice. And it's already happening. So, this is the kind of stuff where, I think it's important, and I'm hoping that this is actually a concerted effort, that the UN has a climate action summit coming up in September. It's the climate action summit. I'll just give you the date for it. Yes, it is. As I said in the intro, it's the 23rd of September. If you want information, you just go to un.org/en/climate change, or just search for the UN Climate Action Summit. Again, do I believe that the UN by itself will just kind of solve all these problems? No, it has no authority. It has no teeth. It can pass resolutions, it can pass plans, but, essentially everything's voluntary. There's no enforcement mechanisms. That's why there's also massive protests scheduled for the same time. So I'd encourage you to kind of check in, look into 350.org, look into Global Climate March, look at the kind of protests that will be taking place, the kind of action that is going to be demanded by people, right? We see now, this is why I wanted to highlight Greta Thunberg. She's, that 16-year-old Swedish climate activist who's went on the school strikes, who has been part of the youth movement that has emerged out of Europe and that has helped kind of inspire folks here in the States to actually do climate strikes and to organize mass protest, and to basically do what people of my generation and older and even younger for that matter have failed to do, right, in leadership positions, and that is actually say, I don't care what you tell me is politically possible. We're going to demand this, because they're the first group of people who have been acting like we actually have the crisis that we actually have. So Greta Thunberg, she has basically she did a train trip around Europe earlier this summer, and now she's coming to the UN Climate Action Summit. But she is not taking planes, right? Because planes actually in a year produce more carbon in the environment than some entire economies, right? So she's like, you know what? Part of what we're going to have to do is change what we do, change how we live, change how we engage with the world. So she is actually working on her way over on basically a solar-powered and turbine-powered, water turbine-powered sailboat, so she can have a zero-carbon impact on her trip across the North Atlantic. So a yacht that is kind of a racing yacht, and so that's designed specifically to have a zero-carbon imprint. But it's going to be a little bit of a harrowing journey, from what I understand. And you can follow her on Instagram, Greta Thunberg, and she's going to be coming to UN Climate Summit and be there for the protest too as well. So I hope that at least some of you will be there, or at least in solidarity marches here. That brings me to the one story that I wanted to highlight today, which there was a story in The Guardian this week. It's called "The Coal is Over, the Miners Rooting for a Green New Deal." This is it's an article by Michael Senato, right? I think that's how you say his name. And interestingly enough, it's from Matewan, West Virginia. Right? He's in Matewan, West Virginia, reporting. And Matewan is significant. And for those of you who don't know, in 1920, Matewan was the site of a massacre. Right, you had pro-union coal miners who were kind of organizing because the conditions were so horrible. There's a great movie about Matewan, but coal company hires all their thugs and all that kind of stuff, and in the end, 10 people were killed, and it became one of the most brutal fights over the future of the coal industry in U.S. history. Right now, we have, as we know, coal is dead, right, or is dying. And if it's not anything if it's not dead, we should kill it, right? Precisely because we need to be acting like we're in a crisis mode, because we are. So what's fantastic, right, is that you're beginning to see these voices that are making the case that we need to make the transition from coal, but that transition is coming from, or that argument is coming from people who actually worked as coal miners. So I'll just give you an example. So after Alexander Ocasio-Cortez, right, and Markey, right, and Markey basically proposed a Green New Deal, it's beginning to have some kind of impacts. Because you remember, where the Green New Deal does not simply say, okay, just, coal is over, those people are on their own, maybe we'll give them some education, right? That's been the Democratic line for a long time. Well, we have to make this transition, so we're going to give them, free classes or training. Right? Yeah, you tell it to somebody who's worked for 30 years as a coal miner, right? And they're going to go out what? And they're going to learn how to program, right? I mean, after your body has taken that kind of abuse for your entire life? No. So part of what happens to the Green New Deal is you say you're going to buy out their contracts. You're going to pay for them to leave coal, right? And if that means they sit around and they watch TV all day, doesn't matter, right? It does not matter, right? It's basically saying this is a universal basic income for coal miners, and make sure that they put in their due. And now we're going to take care of them, because look, you can't just leave people out in the cold and or tell them that they can get more education and that's going to save them. No, you're going to actually take care of folks. And also that we're going to have new industries that are going to be required for making this transition, right? For making the transition to the Green New Deal. So what do? You locate them in these areas that have been environmentally decimated by extractivism, right? And so this is beginning to resonate, right, by some folks. So, The Guardian basically quotes this guy by the name of Jimmy Simpkins. He's basically saying, look, coal is over. Forget coal. It can never be back to what it was in our heyday. It can't happen. The coal is not there to mine, right? Thank you, right? He's someone who worked as a coal miner for 29 years, right? So even these folks who have worked there, they know this. And look, if you paid any attention to what's happened to the coal industry, or especially in areas that some of the earlier coal mines, right? They're not employing thousands and thousands of people, right? A lot of the mines have been mechanized, lots of the kind of extractivism that they're going through right now is like these crazy processes. They bring these machines in that just cut out slots of rock and coal, right? And then the land collapses behind them. Like literally, people have lost their homes because the land collapses, right? So they're doing more and more like horrendous ways of kind of mining. Of course, we know about mountaintop removal. We're watching whole landscapes being kind of reduced to nothing. I mean, if you ever had to have a question about, whether or not humanity is kind of deserves to move forward, you look at what they've done to big sections of mountain areas in Appalachia. I mean, it's incredible, right? So this was good to see. So, I put a link in the show notes about seeing some of the folks who are kind of emerging out of these former coal areas and beginning to say, you know what, maybe we need to make an argument for the Green New Deal. Maybe we need to get behind the Green New Deal and determine the future of this. Maybe we can actually kind of like not just think about the few and dwindling numbers of miners and of fossil fuel workers that are going out there. Maybe we start thinking about expanding the kind of labor pool, by expanding the amount of jobs that are out there by building out our infrastructure. And we've done it before. I've listened to, I listened to his books on tape kind of stuff, and some of it I read, some of it I listened to in the car. But Bill McKibben's book, Falter, I just finished that, and it's a definitely important book to read. And in that, he basically talks about, look, we're at the point now, we have all the technology we could possibly want, right? Solar power is the cheapest way to generate electricity now because of the advancements of the technology. That's number one, right? And what is happening in like kind of in these coal areas is basically, people are getting the shaft, right? I look at people. I remember, the images of coal miners and the kind of labor movement there's a long history there. I mean, Mother Jones, for Christ's sake, was like, in Pennsylvania and all throughout Appalachia organizing coal miners. And I think that what happens sometimes with the way that we think about labor, right? It happens in the same way that people think about, like, the white working class and Trump. Right? We use these stereotypes. But because these workers organized in the worst conditions possible and fought back against the industries that were the strongest industries, that they were the Amazons of their time, the steel industry, the coal industry, right? They were the ones who seemed unstoppable, and these workers organized, and they got a union, and they substantially and significantly improved the lives of people over time. Out of that became, the weekend. We got the weekend. We got vacations. We got, the end of child labor. All this kind of stuff, right? And we look back at those, and we forget that the jobs themselves were horrible jobs. Even with good union contracts, people still died of black lung, right? We know that those are still dangerous jobs. That if you had basically but if you're growing up in these areas, that's probably the best job that you can get, right? That doesn't mean it's a good job. It might give you good pay, but the conditions of your work might destroy your body, might cause you to leave this planet earlier than need be, right? And then take part in the destruction of, the landscape around your communities, right? And I get the fact that you'll say, look, there's no other way, right? Well, I'm going to take the job. I'm going to defend that. But we shouldn't romanticize the jobs, right? What we should romanticize is that workers have the ability to set the terms of the debate. Workers have the ability to win when they organize collectively, and they could stand up against the wealthiest, the most powerful corporations and people on this planet, and they can win. That's what, if you want to romanticize that. And what that means is that workers are in a position to articulate the terms of the future if we organize, right? We don't have to just accept the crumbs, right? And so when I see this article in The Guardian about former coal miners saying, hey, you know what? We need to begin to argue for a Green New Deal, that gets me excited. Because it tells me that there's folks within the labor movement who've been organizing, and I know that they're there already, believe me, who basically are saying, look, we need to get behind this, and we need to argue for this, and we need to join up with the Green New Deal, because we're going to look at the rest of our lives, for our children, and for our grandchildren down the road, for communities, possible communities that, you know what, so their kids don't have to go back into those conditions, right? So anyway, so check out that article when you get a chance. It's well worth the read, right? And it's about time that we started kind of looking for these kind of stories instead of the stories that just kind of look at Appalachia or look at miners or look at particular swaths of the country as just this thing, right? We got to get ourselves out of that kind of bullshit mentality of like there's red states and there's blue states, and as if that, you know, that's something for TV, for pundits to be able to easily talk about the leanings of the states, that does not talk about what's actually happening in those states. It's not getting on the ground with people who are organizing. We saw that with the teachers in West Virginia, right? We saw that with the teachers in Oklahoma. We're seeing this now emerge in the coal industry. We're seeing this with people fighting for a $15 minimum wage with a union, right? We're seeing this kind of growing up, fighting back, and that is happening in quote-unquote red states and quote-unquote blue states, right? It's because when people organize, we win. So I've been thinking a lot about this, and this is kind of like the sidebar on this, is I've been thinking a lot about this going back to campus this year. Because like, if anybody kind of knows me or has heard me talk about things here, I've not been exactly hopeful when it comes to looking at the direction of public higher education in the state. I've spent years really attempting to make arguments and to organize around that the direction that we're heading in is going to fundamentally alter and decimate public higher education. And of late, in part because of some things that have happened kind of internally with our union, in part some of the things that I think the missed opportunity that our union had of kind of really building power following our strike in 2016. I've grown increasingly concerned that we've moved back to this model that is much more a business unionism model, that is asking members to trust leadership, asking members to kind of like not pay attention or only pay attention when they're asked to pay attention, to not be part of the process, to not build power from the ground up. And that concerns me. But, you know, look, like we're not alone, right? My union's not alone. This is happening all over the place. We've seen with APSCUF has basically been decimated in the wake of Supreme Court decisions, right? Citizens United. I'm sorry. I'm spacing it right now. But in the wake of anti-union decisions and the kind of the right to work policies, there's been, I think, an understandable but self-destructive impetus, just basically to circle the wagons and to close off attempts to organize from the ground up, and instead just to try to kind of maintain what's there. But we'll see. And good. Tell me if I'm being too cynical on this. Tell me if I'm getting this wrong. I'd love to see it. Now, having said that, I also know there's amazing work happening right now in the labor movement, especially by those folks, younger folks who are kind of coming up through the movement, who are basically challenging their leadership, who are basically saying, no more. We're going to do things differently. We're going to be more militant. We're going to be like those teachers in West Virginia, right? We're going to be like those teachers in Chicago, right? We're going to be like the Fight for 15 people who go on strike against the fast food industry, right? We're going to kind of like claim power for ourselves. And if leadership wants to get behind us, awesome. If not, we're the ones with the power, not leadership. So, I think that's where we're going. And I've got some reasons to hope moving forward. I mentioned this before 2 weeks ago on the podcast that I am very psyched to see a increase in the number of people that are or a number of campuses that have chapters of the PA Student Power Network, for example. Kutztown has had kind of clusters of this. My university has had clusters of the PA Student Power here and there since their founding in 2016. But I know going forward, it's a student from Kutztown. She did an internship with them this summer. She's going to be organizing. I met with them a couple weeks ago. And they're going to be starting up at Kutztown. And I'm hearing similar stories at kind of other campuses. And there are faculty members, right, sometimes with the support of the local union or sometimes not with the support of the local union, that are working with those students to build power, right? We're certainly going to be doing that at Kutztown. That gives me a lot of encouragement. I've also been encouraged by the number of young folks that are getting active, whether it's about, around education, whether it's around climate change or whatever. And I can see myself in this position. I've got looking for ways that I can help, right? Instead of being in a position where it's about defining what we should do, right? To say, how can I help? How can I help them, right? How can I be part of that and help foster that? So that's really kind of where I'm thinking. And there's some good signs moving forward for that. Because, look, I think the presidential election, it's going to be a shit show. I don't think Trump is going to be easy to defeat. But from an organizing perspective, the election, it provides an opportunity where people start paying attention more. Right. And the key, I think, for a lot of us, right, take my opinion for what it's worth, for a lot of folks who are organizing kind of on the ground, is to remember the lessons of 2016 and particular kinds of lessons. The lessons are that, look, the power lies in the movement building. Right. The Women's March basically got it going. Right? They broke tradition. It wasn't normal. It was uncomfortable for people to, disrupt an inaugural weekend. But they did that. Biggest march in U.S. history. Right? And it didn't just go away. Right? Women and men went back to their communities, their campuses and things, and they organized weekly meetings. They organized monthly meetings where they kept that going. Indivisible. Right, they put out their guide and then basically organized chapters of kind of all over the country. Right, they were like grassroots, bottom up, people saying, "I want to do this too as well," and built those movements and organized people and taught them how to go talk to Congress people, to kind of protest to your congressperson and put pressure on at the ground level, not just at this national media spectacular, but in their backyards. Then we saw DSA, the unprecedented rise of DSA. Democratic Socialists of America, doing organizing and pushing further. Not just saying, okay, we're going to organize, we're going to pressure for better policies. No, we're going to change the terms of the debate. We're going to go out, we're going to door knock on Medicare for all. We're going to go out, we're going to organize like taillight clinics, right, in areas that are historically poor, many cases minority areas where getting pulled over, right, by a cop, right, for a broken taillight, right, or a taillight that's not working could mean death, right? We've seen that enough. So free clinics to go out and do this. Something simple like that, because the point is not just a taillight. The point is an opportunity to build concrete connections with people, to organize next door, in your neighborhood, in your community. That's gone on. And those are the lessons to remember, right? And you look at where the debate is now, even what the Democrats are talking on that, the fact that in part because of the Bernie Sanders campaign in 2016, right, and the mobilizing has continued since then. Medicare for all. We're not talking about whether or not Medicare for all is a crazy idea. We're talking about what version of Medicare for all. Right? We're talking about free college tuition as legit. We're seeing Elizabeth Warren coming out, kind of making the argument 95% of student debt we're going to get rid of. Bernie Sanders, get rid of it all. These are going to have tangible, real-world impacts, concrete impacts on people in this country. Imagine if you were the student loan debt was taken off your shoulders, what that would do. And I frankly get sick and tired of listening to people who say, "Yeah, well, I had to pay my debt. I'm going to be mad at them. I don't want them to." I said, "What the hell is that? What the hell is that?" Imagine that if you thought about that with your kids, right? Imagine that. Imagine you say to your kids, you say, you know what? I had to struggle, right? I had to struggle. And, me personally, right? I grew up, right? In a single parent family for a chunk of my life at a critical time, right? I grew up with food stamps, right? I had to drink freaking god-awful powdered milk for years, right? I used to steal from my mom's macrame box, right? Quarters, so that my friend Scott and I could go over the mall and play video games, right? We didn't have much, right? And so should I then turn around and when I look at my son or my daughter, say, playing an Xbox, right? Or being able to go on trips, should I turn around and say to them, you know what? I didn't have that, so you shouldn't either. You should have to suffer like I did when I was a kid, right? I had a sister who was mentally handicapped, right? Because of in our family, we have an allergic reaction. You've heard me talk about this before on the show. Allergic reaction to the measles, mumps, rubella shot. Right, she got encephalitis, right, and she perfectly normal kid. She got brain damage as a result of that. I was personally in a coma when I had it. But should I say to my kids, so therefore, hey, one of you got to end up like my sister. Sorry, you got to have it the same as I did. That works absolutely contrary to everything that at least I grew up with. The idea that I'm going to work hard, I'm going to fight through, but I want to make it better for my kids. Right? And not just my kids, everybody's kids. Right? I don't want anybody to have to go through and do that. Right? Does that mean, is that idealistic? Yeah, sure. Right? But the idea is that we can do better. And we looked at when we've done things collectively better, we've improved a lot for the future generations, right? The next round of kids, right? And there was a time when we took pride in those things, right? So instead of kind of people at the end of their lives, right? When they're no longer able to work, when they're retired, instead of having to kind of like die paupers and eat cat food or beg for food, we have Social Security to provide some degree of anti-poverty stuff, some degree of kind of like security in your old age. That was considered an advancement. The fact when they're old, you have Medicare. Right? So instead of just having to kind of rely upon, hopefully my church will kind of have somebody who can give me medicine, that now you can go see a doctor. That was considered an advancement. And those people that fought for that Medicare, those people that fought for Social Security, those people fought for the weekend, those coal miners who fought for a better thing, they didn't kind of turn around and then therefore say, oh, everyone else coming up has got to suffer like we did. No. What they said was this is part of what we do because we see ourselves in a historical perspective. We see ourselves as bigger than my life. That our impact can live on even long after we're dead. That, my friends, is where we need to be. And those are the lessons that we got to go forward. And 2020, yes, the focus will be on electoral politics, right? But this is an opportunity to organize and to shift the way that we're thinking about the future. Shift the way we're thinking about what's possible. Right? That's my hope. And that's helped it. I was saying to a few people this week, actually, that I feel like this summer, spending time with my kids, giving myself a break, I just needed it, I guess. I didn't realize how bad. I felt like I recharged my soul in some ways. Right. I didn't realize how dark of a spot, in terms of my perspective on things was. And, obviously there's concrete objective reasons why that's the case. You look at climate change, you look at Trump, you look at what's happening with, immigrants and kids in cages and all this stuff. That's enough to kind of make you freaking depressed. But I've turned that kind of corner, right? And so it's a good time to have that space of reflection. So anyways, it's long ways around kind of talking about what's going on. What I wanted to say here is because look, I've been, I'll show the guilt of my Catholicism, right? Growing up Catholic, right? So I feel horrible about the fact that, look, I've dropped the ball on a few things this summer. In particular, I've had some articles that have come in from, for some new writers. And I just have not gotten to them. You're going to see those come out in the next the next couple days. But And because frankly, I had to think about, well, what's going to happen with Raging Chicken? What are we going to do with Raging Chicken? And I've got some ideas about that. Some of them which I've talked about on this show. But I also thought about, I need to start to rethink about how we actually build infrastructure, media infrastructure, right? Progressive media infrastructure for the long haul. My hope had always been that, naively, obviously, that when you build something like Raging Chicken Press, right, a progressive media site that was, we staked our claim on kind of muckraking and pulling no punches and investigative work and covering movements, and that no one else was doing that, right? We started in 2011, nobody else was doing that. And my belief, again, my naive belief, was that if we built this, right, the cliche, if you build it, they'll come, right? The idea that once you provided this, once you built this thing, once you started doing something that people would see and they would want to support that, people in the progressive community would come out of the woodwork, right? Now I'm being, even then I didn't believe that, but would come out of the woodwork and would help fund this, right? So that we could increase and we could build it out, right? So that we get more people training, we could actually get more eyes on the prize. That it wasn't just Sean Kitchen, right? Muckraking, because you all have seen what's happened, right? I mean, Sean's basically not doing much writing anymore. I mean, he comes for the podcast and things like this. He's got other positions, right? He's got other jobs now, right? But without his voice in Raging Chicken Press, right? I think that has substantially diminished Raging Chicken Press, right? Because I feel that gap and that void that is there, right? And I've struggled to find out how to get there. And frankly, part of it is the fact that we can't pay, right, journalists full time, right? And what we do pay our contributors is like it's best at best like a thank you card, right? I mean, $50 a month plus additional stuff if you produce more articles, whatever like that. That's just like an acknowledgement. It's not anything sustainable. But my belief was that we'd be able to build this in such a way that people would want to contribute, that would want to support Raging Chicken Press so we could do more. And, frankly, I've been frustrated, right, especially over the past, since 2016. I mean, I think it's, we started getting going and we've got, a huge thanks to all the members who have ponied up, right, who have been with us even from the beginning, new ones who've joined just in the past year, right? So I'm not saying that nobody is, we've got, look, we would not be here, I would not be talking to you right now if people had not stepped up and done this. But I also have to, be perfectly frank. I listen to shows like, Majority Report, I listen to, shows like even the Michael Brooks show, right? Ones that are kind of based in major media areas, right? And they're getting like several hundred patrons, right? And they're able to kind of build and kind of support stuff. Yet we need that kind of stuff not in New York City, not in Philadelphia, not in in the major media outlets. We need it in places that is going to pay attention to everyday politics of people, not just in the urban areas, right? That has been part of the mission of Raging Chicken 2 as well, is not just to reproduce what is already happening in those urban areas, but to bring a voice to all the people, all the movements that are impacting people's lives across this state, Pennsylvania and beyond, right? And so it's been a struggle, right? And if I didn't have the job that I have with a union contract, right, this would not exist either. The only thing that is keeping this show going long term is the fact that I have disposable income. I've chosen to have disposable income to invest in this, right? Our members that has helped extraordinarily wouldn't be able to pay our contributors at all if it wasn't been for our members sticking up. We probably wouldn't have been able to increase our bandwidth, right, and security measures if it had not been for our members, right? But the vast majority of this, right, is me, right? It's because I am lucky enough to have a union contract, a union job that pays me well enough at least that I don't, at the end of every month, I'm not, waiting for the next paycheck, so that I could devote some of it and invest in this thing. So anyways, that had always been my hope. And then kind of a look forward, I'm thinking about some other ways that we might be able to kind of support writers. I mean, my goal has always been to develop writers out of movements, right? To develop kind of media activists that are kind of located in the movements. And I've been thinking a lot about this over the summer because, like, look, in my view, what we should be able to do is, like, if I have an organization that I'm kind of like mobilizing, part of what I need to be thinking about and mobilizing and organizing is that how do I basically have voices, develop people that are going to get my narrative and my story out, right? That are going to cover the movement from the inside and get that story out, right? Kind of like movement media, right? Not PR, right? Actual writers and journalists who can kind of expand the conversation and have a place to write, right? We got to get away from the PR and we got to actually develop activists or media activists who are going to do the kind of work we've done in Raging Chicken. And so the idea was that if you provide this platform, Raging Chicken Press, right, for these writers to cut their teeth on this stuff, right, and give them that opportunity to get that story out, then we could build on that conversation over time. But I'm thinking that what might have to happen is it might have to be kind of a second organization, if you will, whose sole purpose, and I've you looked at a lot of kind of progressive media outlets across the country. A lot of ways that they're organized is that you have your publication, but then you have a separate foundation that is solely devoted to kind of like paying journalists, right? Paying to develop that kind of stuff. So I'm bouncing around some of those ideas. My last experience of doing a nonprofit didn't go so well. It got to be way too much work and way too much time. I just could not let it happen. And then even when it was just kind of like on the edge of maybe starting to come together, Trump happened. And then that was it. So anyways, that's my kind of backstory is here. I'm sure everyone's getting sick and tired of listening to me now, so I'm going to get out of here. I want to remind everybody that, look forward to that going forward. It's basically my point. Remind everybody, got the 2 free will releases, or 1 free will release tomorrow, and that is the pineapple mash. Should be awesome. And last week you had the Scarecrow, the Autumn Spice Wheat Ale, and Extra Special Peach. So those might be available too as well. So thanks for sticking with me. I'm sorry that Sean's not here again, and but we'll figure it out kind of going forward about format and that kind of stuff. And if you have ideas, right, you have ideas about what you'd like to see on the show like this, drop me a line. You can just drop me a line at ragingchickenpress@gmail.com. That's probably the best place to get me if you want to actually get me. You can also hit us up on kind of a Twitter account, Facebook page, whatever it might be. I'd love to do some interviews. I'd love to talk to some people, and I'd love to get other ideas about how we might actually kind of help build out our media infrastructure. Okay? Anyways, this is Kevin Mahoney, editor and founder of Raging Chicken Press. Thanks for sticking with us. Remind you, you can support Pull No Punches, progressive, homegrown progressive media right here in the state of Pennsylvania. You become a member of Raging Chicken Press for as little as $5 a month. Simply go to patreon.com/rcpress today. All right. Sean, I hope you got your laundry done. I hope the coffee was good. Have a good weekend. See you, everybody. See ya!